Well, it's 1:36. We should probably start.
All right. I'll get it started. Welcome everybody to the ARPA Advisory Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 10th. As always, the meeting of the ARPA Advisory Transformation Committee are public meetings as defined by the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act and should follow these guidelines. As this public meeting is held virtually, it will be recorded and made available to view on the DDS website. Committee members must make a good faith effort to state their name and title if applicable each time they speak during the meeting. If a committee member would like to speak, please raise your hand and one of the co-chairs will acknowledge you. There is no public comment portion to this meeting. Members of the public are able to join, watch, and listen only. All right, moving to the approval of minutes for the 12/13/2022 meeting. Is there any additions to the minutes? Hearing none, could I have someone approve the 12/13 minutes? Tracy?
Move to approve.
Second.
Is that Shannon?
Yes.
All in favor? Any opposed? Since I wasn't here last time, should I be abstaining? So
Sure.
I'll abstain. Okay, let's go to the updates from committee co-chairs. Peter, the Residential Transformation Committee?
Yes, this is Peter Mason. So we met January 5th. What was that? Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. We had Heather Latour present from Maricash, and she presented her about CLA apartment program. She had an individual who's been in that program present, and it was pretty informative. She was basically talking about having, it's similar to the transition house in a CLA setting. The thing about that is the way that she has 3 apartments that are considered one CLA. And when you start listening to it, it's a great idea. The problem is I don't think that would probably go over with DSS at this point. Some of those things that started, and she said they started that back in '87. So that was before we had like supported living and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff was done under a CLA license, and has been grandfathered in. As I told Heather, it's probably something you don't want to advertise because it could end up becoming a question as to whether it's actually a CLA or not. So, and you know, the idea was there was 3 separate apartments and the staff would then go between the 3 separate apartments. It's similar to what we're looking at doing with a transition house, except they'll all be under the same roof. Hers is actually in an apartment complex, so it was interesting to hear. Let's see, we talked about, we had McDowell Communication present. So a lot of that thing we talked about was the survey that has gone out. And after that survey, we had requested that a letter go out to providers with a copy of the survey. And unfortunately, that did not get out. So hopefully that will be out today so that providers can see actually what that survey is. For those that don't know, McDowell has developed a survey to be given to individuals. And I say that individuals because we got into this whole thing with the legality of who can get the survey. And we ended up having to send the survey to the legally responsible person. And in most cases, that's probably the case manager, not the case manager, the guardian. So we sent out 9,200 surveys that went to individuals living in a congregate setting. Of those 9,200, about 1,500 were their own legal guardians. So those individuals actually got the survey themselves. The other 7,500-ish went to their legally responsible person. What we were told is that the guardian would have to give permission for the individual to complete it. So by the time we got it to the guardian for their completion, for their approval to get this out, it was going to take too long for us to get that survey back. So that's why we had sent it out to the legally responsible person. On the letter we sent, we asked them to share that with the person and fill it out with the person. Of course, we're encouraging that, but we can't make the guardian to do that. It's our hope that most of them will do it that way.
Peter?
Yep.
Steven Siegelow, parent. I did get the survey in the mail yesterday. So they're
Great.
definitely getting out.
And it's one of the things that we're trying to do is to make sure that we have a way of measuring the outcome of all this initiative. And so this first round, we realize a lot of people don't know what we're talking about. And we're expecting we're expecting to see that in our results. So then that's going to be our base. And then we want to see what happens a year from now, 2 years from now, when we put that out. Do people now know what the ARPA initiative is and all the different pieces to it? So we realize that this first one's not going to give us a whole lot of information, but we're hoping that it starts spurring conversations as to what are you guys talking about? What is this to get people more involved? Shannon, I see your hand up.
Yes, Shannon Giacomino, DDS ombudsperson. I've also gotten some feedback, Peter. I think when the letters went out and the surveys went out, it was called the Moving On Initiative, which I think was also confusing. People, aren't very much aware yet of ARPA, and I think we have to be thinking about using consistent terminology. The other thing, I think just in terms of the amount of information that's been put out in the community and like within just the past couple of weeks has created some confusion because there are stakeholder forums with Deloitte, there are forums with the commissioner, and then there's these surveys. And so I think I know that it's all been an attempt to try to get information out, realizing we're behind on that. And yet I think it's really important that we have a plan for how communication goes out, that we have consistent terminology that we're all using so that things are understandable to people. And I know that you've gotten this feedback already from our meeting, but I just kind of wanted to put this out there with the advisory committee as well.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I'm glad that's coming out to light. So a couple things. We're now debating on what, to call this. It is the Moving On initiative underneath ARPA. The ARPA is the funding piece to this. the concern we have is if we call it just the ARPA initiative, that ends in 2025. And so then everybody's going to think, okay, it's all done. And so we don't want to have it named something that's going to end. This is supposed to be something that's going to keep going and going and going. And so that's why we're looking at a different name for this. Have we communicated that well? No. Which gets me to the other point is that DDS has never been strong in communication. And we realize that, which is why we have a communication consultant that is taking a look at all this stuff. While they're looking at doing a communication plan generally, we need them also to look into the weeds as to how all this stuff works through so that we can get some consistency in terms of working through our communication. So all this stuff's not a shock to me, but it's part of the process of us learning as we're going, and trying to work through that. I think the other piece to this is as we try to make things, make the language as clear, concise, and to the skill levels of the different people, it then starts, you then start getting into, is this too much? Is this too complicated? And you start pulling, oh, let's pull this piece out and pull out this piece. And at the end, I don't think it makes it difficult to be able to explain something in a complex way in simple language, so to speak. And so then you pull this out, all right, let's keep it this way. And I know that they worked on that letter to the individuals probably over a 2-week period. And still now at the end, it's like it still didn't come out with what we wanted. So I think that's a piece to it that we have to get better as to how to write this in a way that meets all the different skill levels of people who are going to be reading it. And I think that's going to be an art form that's going to take us a while to figure out how to do that, especially on something that's as complicated as what we're talking about. Shannon?
Shannon Jacobino, DDS ombudsperson. I think that, just my 2 cents, right, is that sometimes less is more if it's clear and it's direct. And we can always give people basic information with, some place for them to look. There are a lot of people who like to dive deep in our community, but the mass communications that go out are for the masses. And so I think we have to maybe find a way for those people who want to dig deeper to have access to that information, because there are a lot of people in our community who do that. But the mass communication has to be for the masses. So I think this is what you're saying, but we have to try to figure out how to do both.
Yeah, right. Let me see, that was 3 points that you had. That was the 4th one. Hold on, I'm trying to remember. We're learning from this, and as we go through, I think the other piece is that all this stuff is happening all in January. It's just bad timing, because we need to give enough of a head start. It just seemed like stuff that could have started in December, then December wasn't a good time. And, so then we'll push into January, then other things were happening. We need to do better in terms of the communication piece of it. And, that my goal, my hope is that the communication consultants, that's why we brought them on. I knew I wasn't one that was great at communicating. So I need, and I know the department's had some issues with that hopefully this will help us in the long run. There'll be issues going, in the short run, but hopefully we'll come up with a process that will better in the long run. So. Is your hand up again, Shannon?
Shannon Jacovino, DDS ombudsperson. I promise this will be the last point I make on this topic, but I also think that we need to look at not just external communications, but internal communications so that each committee and the staff knows what's going out, because many people who are on these committees are people who are in communication with a lot of other people in our community, you know, either they're providers or advocates or family members, but also like the case managers, because if there's confusion about a communication that comes out from DDS, people are generally gonna, you know, reach out to their case manager for clarification. And if the case managers don't know that something's going out or they don't have any information about it, then they're not going to have a lot of answers. And so I think we have to look at things from both perspectives, internally and externally, and making sure that there's coordination there.
Yep. Well, and that was the original design for the DDS engagement committee, and the individual and family was to try to help resolve some of that, but it has not done, hasn't got to where it needs to be yet. So hopefully that will help. Let's see, I can talk about that. The other one. We talked about the transformation plans that were brought in, that were submitted. To date, we have 22 agencies that submitted their intent or their interest in submitting the plan. And of those 22, 11 agencies say they're willing to start immediately, which is a great start. You know, we're looking at working through with those agencies. The communications group will also, or the Deloitte will also be asking the other 11 as to what their hesitancy is, if they don't want to do it now, what help do they need? So we'll be working at some communication to those that say they did it, they want to, and how we can help them start. And then those that say they are interested but not sure they want to do this right now, to see what issues there are, so we can see if we can help in terms of that. Then there was a lot of talk about the new rates that were issued. There's a lot of stuff with the rates, and I'm no longer part of that. So we've got some questions that people are looking regarding the rates, and how's that going to work with lawns and URRs and all that kind of stuff. And I haven't yet, but I need to get back to Scott to see what questions he's looking at and wants to answer and send out to providers. So I don't have that information, but I know that there's some concerns or some questions that providers have regarding that. And I think that's what we talked about. We're still working on the issues with families and providers, and we're trying to make those into frequently asked questions, and that's on my end right now, and I have not been able to get to it yet, but that's my goal, is to get through to that. I will say that we are working on the rent subsidy piece, that we have a rent subsidy group that's together, and they're looking at ways to make rent subsidy more beneficial to people. Like one of the things has to do with the percentage. If I can get that, hold on. So right now, when they're doing the calculation, they're looking at their income, and there's a percentage of 45% of income, And that was changed a number of years ago, probably for a budget option piece. They're looking at changing that back to 30%, which would be a big, which have a really big effect on individuals, so that be able to keep more of their revenue and stuff, or their income. So we're looking at a number of different things that we can do to make sure that people, when they do get rent subsidy, that they're not only just paying rent, they also have money for food, and they have money for other things other than just rent. So the department's definitely working into that, and we're have a rough draft going on right now regarding the policy changes. And hopefully we'll be able to get that going and get that out. And it would be making sure that it would be open to everybody and not just anybody new to it. It would be anybody who has rent subsidy now. So, we're looking at that. We know that that's going to increase the cost for DDS. It's if we're gonna do this, we have to make sure we put our money where our mouth is. And so the department's committed to working through this issue. So other than that, that's it for the res committee. Anybody have any questions before we move on? Oh, Michael, I see you.
Yes, Michael Beloff, parent. I just want clarity on the rent subsidy. Is that going to be something that's going to be available for? Is that just for the folks that are participating in moving on, or is that additional rent subsidy? I guess in looking at folks who already have, say, some kind of supports like a Section 8 housing voucher, where they're not getting supports because their rent is so low, but they may need the other supports, like supports for the food and the other things that you were considering rent subsidy to be for. We just want to keep those folks in mind, because hopefully we will get more housing vouchers to be available for our population, and make sure that this support is available to them as well and doesn't interfere with what they're currently receiving.
Well, and that's a good point. This is Peter Mason, DDS. If you go back to the history of rent subsidy was supposed to be a short-term interim payment process until somebody got Section 8. And because Section 8 has been too many people applying for it, there's years and years of waiting lists, that this is just, the rent subsidy has taken on more of a permanency piece to it. But the Section 8 is, I don't think it's state or federal. And so then how those calculations come out, we don't have control over that. We have control over rent subsidy, but it does take the point of we don't want everybody jumping off the Section 8 to get to rent subsidy, if that's better, versus we have to make sure that whatever we do that it will assist the whole group. Now, it may take us a while to figure out what the ramifications are of that to the Section 8, because we have to figure out what happens to rent subsidy first. We can't do it all at once. So we'd have to see, how this all plays out. So right now we're tackling the rent subsidy piece, but I think my concern would be is if that looks better deal, then people are going to jump off of Section 8, and that's not something we want either. So,
Michael Beloff, parent again. I think having some familiarity with the Section 8 housing calculations, it's not a terribly complicated one, and I think partnering with one of the agencies, like say Charter Oak in Stanford, would be very helpful to just give DDS an idea of how it works, so they have a better sense of what is available to folks once they receive it. It's generally based on their other income. It's a standard. Folks are supposed to pay 30% of their income towards housing, whatever that might be, and the federal government then makes up the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and the issue would be you either get rent subsidy or you get Section 8. If there needs to be an offsetting amount, that would be a whole different process. Because we wouldn't be able to change the Section 8. Whatever you get from Section 8, you get from Section 8. So if that means we need to give additional dollars to people who have Section 8, that's a whole different funding mechanism. And would have to figure out what that would look like, if possible at all. I have no idea. I don't know if it's, you can either state dollars or federal dollars. I don't know. So I don't think, though the process may be simpler, I don't know if the solution is as simple as it is with rent subsidy, because rent subsidy is all within DDS. Anybody else have any questions?
All right, this is Keith Lavalette, DDS, also the co-chair of the Day Transformation Committee. We actually had a meeting yesterday, and it was kind of a catch-up meeting. We had to cancel most of our December meetings due to one reason or another. So we actually had Deloitte present for the first time to the committee. So it was much like the previous presentations they've given this committee, just trying to catch us up with the Day Committee on where the Deloitte is at. We also had McDowell give a presentation, and it was the same presentation that Peter just described in the residential description that he gave, talking about the survey going forward. We also, again, same as the residential, updated everyone on the phase 1. Something I did not mention to you, Peter, that there was one agency that said they submitted, but they were not on the list. So we need to check into that to see what happened.
You mean they submitted that they were interested?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we can bring that up at our Deloitte meeting then.
Right. And then we just talked about continue to talk about the barriers moving from a congregate day setting to a more independent employment-based setting. So that was basically a catch-up meeting for the day providers since we missed much of December's meetings. Any questions on the day side? Peter, I do not believe Joe is on the call. Do you have any updates on the DDS engagement?
Yeah, this is Peter Mason. Just off the top of my head, I know that the engagement committee is looking at putting out putting together a newsletter, like a quarterly newsletter, that would go out to staff on a regular basis to keep them informed as to what's happening. That actually seems to have become expanded, that newsletter is now something that's being talked about with McDowell, that the newsletter would try to make it for everybody, so that everybody's seeing the same stuff. So it would go out to families, providers, DDS staff, so everybody's seeing the same information on a consistent basis. So more to follow on that. And I think that's the only thing I have off the top of my head with that.
Okay, Keith Lavalette, DDS, individual and family engagement, either Greg or Shannon.
Okay, yeah, this is Greg McMahon, DDS. We met, I think, twice since the last advisory committee meeting. The meeting on the 19th of December, our primary agenda item was to begin reviewing service descriptions as they exist right now, mostly in waiver language, and asking families to look at those descriptions and how we can use them and adapt them to be more understandable. And part of that process would be trying to create a single place where people can go learn about the types of services that are potentially available to them. Right now, if you were to go to our website, you'd have a hard time finding a single place to learn about all of our services. So that was the beginning of that process. We started with individualized home supports. And both Shannon and I have been looking at other sites in other states to what presentation means they have, and learned, as we often do, that there's nobody really doing anything that we could copy. There were some things that we found that we may use down the road as we develop a website. Website development will take a while, so in the meantime, we really need to develop good, clear descriptions. And there was some conversations among people creating a system where people could plug in what it is they want, and the service would pop up. And there was also discussion about having lists or graphs, various different means, and we're still working on all that. We met again yesterday, and our conversation primarily focused on work that McDowell is doing on creating videos describing our services that are ultimately educational, not so much promotional, that would outline what families who've gone to one of our services, what fears they had when they did that, how they may have overcome the fears, challenges, and a good education and description of what that program might do for people. I won't get too much into it because McDowell's doing a presentation. I have a feeling they may talk about that a little bit, but that was the conversation. The other conversation about the videos was how are we going to watch them in a way that people will see them and that are meaningful. We have a lot of good videos if you were to go look at our video library online, but they're really hard to find and you have to look for them. So we had some discussion about how will they be used, how will they get out there, how will we launch the videos. And again, we've had some conversations with McDowell, and they're considering those same issues on how we might best use. We can create the best videos in the world, but they're not going to do much good if nobody sees them. So we have to figure out how to get them out there. And that pretty much was the primary topics we had. We did talk, as Shannon outlined, a bit about trying to figure out how to have a bit smoother communication. We have so many initiatives and meetings and provider forums and family forums with the commissioner and family forums with Deloitte. There's some confusion out there about which is which. So much as Shannon outlined, I think we need to look overall at the best way to communicate all the efforts in one kind of meaningful way. So our committee had that discussion as well. Shannon, did I miss anything you want to add?
Shannon Jacobino, DDS Ombudsperson. Maybe you said this, Greg, and I missed it, but I think another point that was made about the videos is that it is important to be able to show where we can for each of these support options, how these are accessible to people with all levels of need, particularly people with higher levels of need. Because I think that there's often a perception in the community that when these initiatives happen that are helping to move people towards more independence, that they're excluding people with higher levels of need. So I think that's an important point to remember.
This is Greg McBain, DDS. I think that's about it for our committee report. Any questions?
Okay, Keith Lavalette at DDS. I do not see any questions. So moving on to the next agenda item. We have the McDowell presentation. I believe Maura is on the call. I believe you presented to this group at least once before, correct?
It's entirely possible. We
Well,
may have, I'm not sure.
Maybe you would like to introduce yourself again, and so this group would
Sure.
know who we are. So,
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm Maura Fitzgerald. I'm the Senior Vice President of McDowell Communications Group, which is a communications firm in Hartford, Connecticut. Myself and my colleague, Becca Brockway, are the ones who are doing most of the work with DDS on this project from our side, though we do have a few other staff people who dip in from time to time and will be dipping in to help out. but a lot of what I was going to say has kind of been covered. Peter talked about the survey that has gone out, and it's great to hear that that they are starting to hit people's mailboxes. And you know, just an ask if you have individuals or families who might come to you, you know, saying, "Hey, we got this thing in the mail. What is this all about?" If you could just, you know, reassure them that this is a legitimate survey from DDS, and it's important for us to hear from as many people as possible. So we're looking forward to getting those results back. The other big thing that we're working on are the videos that Greg mentioned. DDS has asked us to put together 7 videos. The topics are supportive housing, individualized home supports, assistive technology, community companion homes, customized employment, remote supports, and self-direction. So each of those topics will be a 3 to 4 minute long video with a short introduction, hopefully, possibly by Commissioner Sheff. And then it will involve a demonstration of the technology or the support that is going to be discussed in the video. And it will also include testimonials that will kind of be sprinkled throughout. And it could be, you know, testimonials from the individual who's doing the demonstration, from family members of that individual, from support staff who are helping out the individual. And as Greg said, a lot of, and I think Shannon too, a lot of what we're going to be looking for to kind of tease out of people as we talk to them is, you know, what were your fears about this technology going into it? How did you overcome those fears? What, you know, what was a positive? What was the positive thing about this, you know, bringing this new support into your life? What were some of the challenges of using the new technology? And, you know, kind of what has this done for you, for your family member, for, you know, the person you're supporting, that sort of thing. So we're working on those. We're hoping to have by the middle of next week, the first 3 or 4 video kind of locations and individuals and people that are going to participate in making the videos chosen. And we'll start filming those at the end of January with the hope that we have at least 2 to 3 videos finished and in DDS's hands by the end of February, beginning of March, and then the others will kind of roll out shortly thereafter. So that is what we're working on with that. And then I believe Shannon or Peter mentioned that we are working on a newsletter. So we're putting together a newsletter template. The idea is that the first newsletter that goes out will kind of be an overarching summary of the project and what's going on. And then there will be summaries for each of the committees and the work that you've done for, you know, since you started meeting in the summertime and into the fall. And then moving forward, the goal will be to do a newsletter either bi-monthly or once a quarter with updates for everyone on what's going on with the committees, what's going on with the transformation project, and just to kind of, you know, another avenue to keep people informed as to what is happening. And we are also working on an overarching communications plan that will help us to kind of roll things out in a bit of a sequential order. Right now, it's a little tough because Deloitte and DDS are still working on what the actual plan is going to be. So our communications right now are very broad and overarching, kind of like a 3,000-foot view of this transformation and kind of what are the potentials and what are the possibilities. And then once we have the actual details of the plan, we'll be able to get much more specific as time goes on. And I will say, just to circle back on the videos, I think our overarching goal is to use these videos as to educate people on possibilities that are out there, but also to give people a sense, to allow people to be able to see either themselves or their family members using these technologies. So, you know, a lot of the feedback that we've gotten is families and individuals are, you know, in general supportive of new technologies and new supports and things like that, allowing people to live more independently. But a lot of times individuals and families have a difficult time seeing their own person being able to use those things. So we want to try and use these videos as a way to get people to kind of see the potential and see the possibility for their own loved ones as this all moves forward. So.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Wynn, you have a question?
Hi, I'm Wynn Everts, the ARC Connecticut, and a parent. Maura, thank you very much for your explanation of the videos. Is the 3 to 4 minutes really going to be sort of a low bogey as an average time? And I'm actually trying to suggest that it should be, because some of these videos are going to contain new services, which are going to take more information transfer than things that are legacy services of DDS. Just a thought. You don't necessarily need to respond, but to the extent that something new is being paraded or something is changing, you know, I urge you to dedicate the time, because I think they can be incredibly effective.
This is Maura Fitzgerald from McDowell Communications Group. One of the things that we had talked about with the production company that's going to be doing these videos for us is the potential of having some possibly longer form videos. So there could be, you know, there'd be a 3 to 4 minute video on the website, but then it could be, you know, like you get to the end of the video or you know, there's a video link and then there's a little description, and then, you know, click here for more information on this particular thing. So then there could be a longer video that flows from that people, if they choose and want to have more information, they could then click into that video and watch something that's longer and has more information in it.
Thank you.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Maura. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Next on the agenda, we have the ARPA initiative update. Peter?
Peter Mason, DDS. So I'm going to try to give the 1,000-foot view of the initiative, where we're at right now. So I'm going to start with the transformation update. So we're in phase 1 right now. As I said, we had a survey that was sent out to providers asking if they had interest in it. And if you had interest, would you be willing to start immediately? And as I said, we had 22 providers submit. And those that submitted, we then distributed the transition plan guide and the template to them. This week, we are also training the DDS staff. They're going through a template that Deloitte has put together, so that they'll be looking at that to review it, to determine, you know, what we've got a set of questions they'll be looking at. Does it answer all the questions? Is there any issues that need to be done? We're looking at, as I said before, all the phase 1 providers will be communicated to by Deloitte, whether they need more information or, you know, any assistance going forward. I told you about the rent subsidy changes. Some of the things that we're looking at in terms of potential issues is to make sure that the DDS staff get to the training so that we're being consistent across the board. We're looking at the number of providers who submitted a plan and then the timing of those submissions. We're still reeling from a number of retirements, and they're slowly up and rehiring. So we want to make sure that providers don't overwhelm one region and submit them all at once, and we won't be able to give it the attention they need. So that's an issue that we're trying to figure out in terms of the submission and the timing of those submissions. One of the things we're also looking at is what the role of CO will be. CO at this point, we're looking at, we need to define that. We know Keith, Greg, and myself will be part of the process, but we really are trying to make this a regional approval process. First off, it's going to be homes or day programs that are within their region, so they need to know what the ramifications are to their region. But also, if we really want this to continue, it has to start to become part of the process, the systemic part of it. And that can't be done on a central office basis. It has to be done in the region and has to be done as they're talking about anything. Why are we looking at setting up a new day program? Do we need to set it up this way? Should it be set up, so it's more in the community? Why are we looking at adding a bed to a house? Does that make sense to the whole plan? So it has to really be brought, down into the system. And so that's why we're really pushing it. At the same time, we know we can't leave them unsupported. So we're trying to find out what that balancing act is so that we can help move this initiative forward. And another potential issue is the transition house option. So we're looking at the transition house, which would be a CLA that people would move in and move out of. The issue is that how is that different than what it is now? And so, we have to see if there's a time element that has to be part of this. Is there an independence piece that needs to be part of it? What is that? What are all the pieces to it? We don't want people just jumping in and saying, oh, we're making this a transition house. Well, what does that mean? So, that's one of the things we're going to look at. And also, the concern we have is that a transition house is still a congregate setting. So people moving into a transition house is not part of the ARPA initiative because it's a congregate setting. It may be a means to the end. And so as people go through that and then they get used to more independence and then move into an apartment, it's the apartment piece that then would be part of the incentives. It's not that interim move. And so while that may be something that's important, we would need to figure out how to do that within the DDS budget piece. And so it has some complications to it that we just need to figure out some of the answers to. And we're talking about something right now that doesn't really exist. So it's hard to visualize what we're talking about until we start seeing some of these come online. Laura went on about the communication update, so I'll give that briefly. As I said, 9,200 or 9,100 surveys went out. And so we're starting to get some of those surveys back. We have all these stakeholder forums. Deloitte is doing stakeholder forums. DDS is doing stakeholder forums. One of the things that we're looking at trying to do is to set up opportunities that are available for people who speak Spanish and how that they can participate. I know that Deloitte has set up one for their family input session in Spanish. And right now as of last week, there were very little attendance, RSVPs for it. And so we need to figure out how do we do the outreach to make sure that we hit that population. So they do come and are able to provide their input. Let's see. Deloitte now is working on phase 2. And as part of that, we looked at the other Connecticut. We reviewed Connecticut, other state agencies within Connecticut. Deloitte's talked to a number of providers. They've also reviewed other states. So we did 5 other states. They're doing these input sessions. And the idea is that will then give them the month of February to pull it all together and to start making some recommendations. Once they do that and they come up with a report, that will then be presented to DDS, and we'll then be determining where we go from there. So we still have a ways to go in terms of the phase 2. And I think, as I've said in the past, and Deloitte found this out with the other states, is that Connecticut is by no means behind. In a lot of other states, they're ahead. And so there's no one state we can go and say, okay, how did you do all this stuff? And so when they looked at the different states, they were looking at different initiatives that we then could mirror that would help bring us forward. But, you know, one of the things that Deloitte's been telling us is they're validating is that Connecticut is truly one of the leaders out there. So we're right up there with everybody else. In terms of some of the other initiatives we have, there should be another round of grants that will be coming out in terms of assistive technology for individuals and families. If it hasn't gone out yet, it should be going out within the next day or 2. Last time we did it, we had an ending date. This time we're trying to have it more open-ended. We may have to close it at the end of the fiscal year, but then we'll reopen it again in the new fiscal year. We want to make sure that we're doing all that we can in terms of getting people assistive technology equipment and be able to expose them to it. We have purchased or in the process purchasing assistive technology equipment for our DDS respite centers. The idea is as families and individuals come in to the respite centers, they'll be able to start experiencing the use of assistive technology. So if they do get supports elsewhere, they'll be able to see, you know, firsthand how it helped them there and hopefully expose them so that they'll start getting more comfortable going forward. We're sending out, we're establishing an AT and me project. Right now we're in the process of purchasing the equipment. The idea with the AT and me is that we'll be training the self-advocates to do peer-to-peer training with individuals to get them familiar with certain technologies. I think one of the things that they're looking at is once you've been trained by the self-advocates, they'll be able to give them, I believe it's a tablet, so that they'll have a tablet that they can use on their own. Once again, we're trying to get the exposure out there. We're looking at sending out training opportunities for providers and DDS staff to get certified in assistive technology. And so that will go out, and so providers or the staff of the DDS providers or DDS staff will be able to take that coursework, and we'll reimburse those providers and the DDS staff. We have contracted with Rewarding Work to do the website, the Employment Network website. There's a 3-month rollout plan that they have. They've begun work on redesigning the current employment networking site. So we anticipate the new site will be up March 1st. Individuals who already have an account when the system rolls out will not need to re-register, so that's good. And contractors will establish, they're going to have a customer service line to help people if they have any issues. Part of the contract is also to advertise and recruit staff to join the website so that families have more options. One of the things with the website is it will have a language selection tool. So depending on whatever language, they'll have 20 different languages that they can change the language to suit whoever and whatever language they speak. So that will be hopefully be an assistance to them. We're working with DSS. We have the RFP for the long-term solution that's being worked through on this through the system. Working with 2 agencies is not easy, so it's actually taking longer than anticipated. One of the things with that new website is, or the long-term solution will be looking at how to establish emergency backup staffing and how that would work. So if a family gets into a crisis and they need staff, how do we set up that they would be able to go to this website to find an emergency staff, and all the problems and implications that it would have to try to do that. We're working through a notice of opportunity to expand supported housing. And this one's going to be to do it in a non-project based setting. Right now, it's been all projects, so it's all been from start to scratch, from scratch. This is looking at how do we help to establish some of these in an existing apartment complex. If we can get over that hurdle, we can get some of these things up and running a whole lot sooner than the 2 to 3 years it takes to build the whole complex. The critical incident report in conjunction with Pulse Light is on track. They've started working through some of the website changes, and so they're working through some of those issues. The off-the-shelf case management system is continuing. We had to go through a whole process of how do we work through our other state agencies? Do they have a process at DSS? So we had to make sure that our process either conformed or didn't conform to theirs. Fortunately, it did not conform to theirs. Oh, shouldn't say that. It didn't conform to theirs. And so we will be going on our own to look for a case management system. That kind of held us up a little bit. So now that we've moved forward with that, we'll be hiring a couple of consultants that will be going out and looking for an off-the-shelf program. we know of 5 states that have a case management system with an authorization system attached to it. So we'll be definitely looking at that because we'd like to combine those 2. The universal assessment is moving forward. There's a number of challenges of us to move to the universal assessment. It takes longer to do, especially initially, and there's a lot of training to it. And so the department is looking at if we were to do this, how would we set this up? Do we keep it with the case managers, or do we set up a separate unit that would do this? So we're looking at what that would entail. There'll be some fiscal pieces to it, so we have to make sure when we do this, then we'll have to go to OPM to say, here are the different pieces, and this is what we want to do. And lastly is the National Core Indicator Survey is being done by UConn, and since it's after the first of the year, they will be starting that process within a couple weeks. That's it. That's all we're doing.
Keith Lavalette, DDS, any questions for Peter? All right. The next agenda item is, are there other issues the advisory committee would like to discuss in future meetings? Is there anything out there that we're missing and people would like to discuss? When?
I whenever it's the Arc of Connecticut and a parent. To the extent that, and I don't know, maybe you've budgeted for it, but to the extent that the new supports, the less restrictive support structures are new to the system, have you determined any training needs that need to be met in order so that people have successful experiences in them?
We have not yet. I don't know what that would be, how we would do that. It's something that we would definitely entertain. I think if you take like supportive housing, it's so new that I don't know, we probably would be not a good one to do the training. It would be probably more Steve at Vavar or some
Others, yeah.
Mark there and all that. Remote supports, we are working through that. Once again, we have the providers that have set up, and as part of the two providers that did it initially as part of their RFP was to assist in terms of the training in terms of that. I think like CCH, we can definitely do some of that stuff, and we've been doing we call it the fourth Tuesday of every month. Forums that people can go on, and there's a list of what the different supports are, and they then have providers who then explain what that is, and DDS staff. Those are all videoed, so if anybody's missed any, they could go back on and look at them, and they can get delineated. You know, we're willing to do all that stuff. We're just, you know, more input we get from everybody as to what they need, the better we can support people.
Thank you.
Keith Lavalette, DDS, any other issues?
Come on now, you guys are always talking about something.
Wynn has another one. Okay, go ahead, Wynn.
So since you opened the door, Peter, whenever it's the Arc of Connecticut parent, historically, I found in the work that I do a certain amount of hesitancy on the part of the department to engage with families, especially in financial matters. Have you given any thought to a way of streamlining it or making it more transparent?
When you say financial matters,
Their
what do you
ownership
mean?
of the dwelling that the person with a disability might be in. Anyway, just want to put that out on the table as something that
Yeah,
you might want to take a look at.
I would like to explore what, you know, what that would look like. So maybe we can put that on a future agenda item, because, you know, what that would look like and what supports would be from us. And would it be better from us or from somebody else? I don't know. But I think, you know, definitely, I think that's something that we should discuss.
Thanks.
Keith Lavalette, DDS, Shannon?
Shannon Jacobino, DDS ombudsperson. I want to second that. I think DDS calls that shared living. You know, where an individual or a family owns a home. And they either have disabled peers living with them, or they might have a non-disabled caregiver. But, you know, when I was at the ARC and when I was out in the community talking to families a lot more, this is something that a lot of families will bring up. They brought it up in meetings with the ARC. I've heard them bring it up in meetings with legislators. And I know that if we are asking families what they want, this is something that I've heard very, very often from people in the community. And so I think it's definitely worth trying to sort of figure out. And I think just in general, being able to try to figure out how to build in some flexibility to work with people where they're at, instead of trying to sort of figure out what new boxes to create, trying to figure out if there's a way to build some flexibility into the system so that people can come to DDS with ideas, and there's an ability to sort of like work it through with them to find a way to make the funding work to meet people's needs instead of like creating more boxes.
So this is Peter Mason, shared living is, it's a unique kind of support. And I know we haven't got it right. And there's a lot of thought that individuals can buy the house and then give it to DDS and then you run it, which that's not shared living. There's individuals who set up with other families, and all of a sudden now there's a fight between the families, and now DDS has become the mediator. And when you're the mediator, you never win. Everybody doesn't like you. There's been there's been houses that have been set up that it then becomes there's an expectation that DDS will fill any kind of vacancy, but then those vacancies can only be filled in a certain way because the families are all saying, well, this is what I want. And so we've hit a number of different issues, and I'm not saying that that's not something to say why we shouldn't do it, but there have been some potholes that we've hit that we have to figure out if we're going to do this. How do we communicate this? And I know Robin Wood, when she was here, she had written this whole guide for supportive some shared living, and it was way too complicated, and we were hesitant of sharing that because it was too complicated. And when we looked at it, we were trying to figure out exactly how that works. We also, I think the program started off, and Robin would say, this is not a program, so you can't give it boundaries. This is just, people can come in and design this the way they want to see it. And while theoretically that sounds great, bureaucratically, that has a hard time for the bureaucrats trying to figure out, well, what do you mean you're doing this and that? So that issue of how to negotiate would have to come into play, because we have a hard time. A lot of DDS have a hard time in terms of that. They're used to the black and white, and then when you get the gray, it all of a sudden starts, well, what do you mean by that? So I think shared living is definitely something we should discuss and figure out how to present that. And maybe you and Tracy and Keith and I can sit down and try to figure out how to attack it, so that we can present it to the committee and figure out how to make sure that we have the pros, the cons, and all that kind of stuff. So if that's something you'd be interested in, you know, I'd definitely be willing to do that.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Michael, I believe you have a.
Michael Beloff, parent, and I want to kind of add to what Shannon was talking about in terms of what parents want. I think, you know, parents often don't understand the complications that get involved with waiver services. I think most of them don't understand what a waiver is, how it works, how their services fit within one waiver or another. The families that I speak to on a regular basis, they love the idea of the CCH, except that it's a CCH. Their concerns are they would like to control the residents and be able to let go of the caregiver if it's not serving what they as the family or the individuals being served wants. And I think that goes to Shannon's thought about having the families own the property and then bring in the supports. I think you're right in that there's lots of complications depending on whether there's multiple families owning the house and they stop getting along, one family owning. I think the answer is maybe not to solve for all answers, but to say we're going to start with, well, one family owning the property with 1, 2, or 3 individuals, whatever we come to conclusion is, and we're going to support this model that we will expand later once we realize what the what the issues are with this one way of doing it, before we open it up to multiple families owning it or donating it to a nonprofit or what have you. But I think that if we can go show progress of, well, here's one way of doing it, and we will support this one way with the opportunity of expanding it once we work out the kinks, I think that would be something that families would welcome in terms of one way of doing it. I think you're right. Trying to have all the different permutations is too challenging, although having a guide in the back that is complicated where in this situation we can find the answer would be helpful. But I appreciate that we can't open it up to everything all at once, but maybe we can start with 1 or 2 models in a shared living that we can help families design that would fit within what the current DDS waivers will support.
Yeah, and you know, as I said, anything is open and I'm willing to entertain that and bring that back. I think one of the big issues that we have when families own the house goes back to our rent subsidy issue. And that because it's owned by what we call a related party, so a parent owning it and for their child is considered a related party. And as such, they can't profit on that house. And so there are guidelines that are in place so that the individual is only going to will only pay rent based on the actual cost. What we get, and we've had many discussions, is that, yeah, but the guy across the street's renting his house for $3,000. And so I'm going to charge $3,000. And it's like, but it's only costing you $2,000. Yeah, but he can get $3,000. This isn't fair to me. So we get into a lot of issues regarding related party. Then we get into the issue of it's rent subsidy. And as such, we have to make sure that we're paying something based on a mathematical equation. And that equation comes into the HUD guidelines. Because what we don't want to have is a bunch of parents in the Gold Coast buying these $1 million homes, and we're supporting that, and individuals living in Hartford can't do that, and we're giving them nothing. So I think that's where we need to look at. So that's why we have this mathematical equation. Well, sometimes that mathematical equation is less than their actual cost. And then we get into this argument as to, yes, but I'm paying for all this stuff. And it's like, well, no, you're not, because DDS is putting money into this. So all these pieces come into play when you start talking about owning someplace. If they rent it, then the rent is the rent, and then we're just dealing with the HUD guidelines. But if it becomes an ownership issue, there's a related party issue where we got to make sure we're not setting up someplace where individuals are profiting from their individuals who's living there.
And this is Michael Bella, parent. I think one way maybe of solving this Gordian knot would be to say, to use the HUD guidelines that they use for Section 8. So under the HUD guidelines, the rent for Section 8 voucher is capped at the median rent for a size apartment in that
Which is what we
geographic
do.
area.
That's what we do for rent subsidy. We do.
And I believe that families who are looking to set this up would be willing to subsidize, because one of the challenges with their actual costs is a family's actual cost depends on the size of the mortgage they purchase for that property. And so, as a family down here in Fairfield County, I completely understand that if I was going to do that, that there would be a deficit between my cost of carrying the house and the cost of what the rents, what the Section 8 housing voucher would be for that property. And as a family, I'm willing to shoulder that because I want stability for housing for my family. And I think that as long as we go work with the HUD guidelines for what rent can be, whether it's through Section 8 or rent subsidies to make them on a par, I think families would still be willing to support these houses.
And I wish all families were like you. There's been many of issues we've had with our ethics committee about homes being purchased and why they can't be reimbursed at what they paid and all this stuff. So even though it's all writing, we have a related party guidelines that explains all this. But sometimes people don't read it and then buy a house and they want DDS to bail them out. So I mean, we've hit it all, and that's not to say not to do this. I'm just giving you, there are certain things that we need to make sure that we're upfront and people know that just, these are the rules. And not everybody wants to hear what those rules are.
And I think having either workshops or white papers on, so you want to do this, these are the restrictions. Mm-hmm. Because then families can fundraise, they can talk to family members. It allows them the opportunity to plan years in advance to save up for the extra costs.
Got it.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Tracy, I believe you're next.
Yeah, Tracy Walker, Journey Found, and I'm going to take the conversation in a totally different direction. There's two things, and Katie, you might want to speak to some of this as well from the provider perspective. The lack of support for the interim measures, and from the provider perspective, some of our folks are going to need much longer transformation times and are going to need intermediate steps, and not having the support of those steps, whatever it might be, whether it's incentives or whatever, may paralyze some providers from moving forward with some of the individuals currently in their program. So that's something we probably need to attend to. The other is there's confusion between sort of the ARPA initiatives, right? Because you have the ARPA money that's going directly to the providers for particular things, because thank you, you've heard DDS has heard our plea that we need to stabilize our agencies. We need the infrastructure, because it's a system that's been decimated, but at the same time, there's been no connection how those funds may or may not be related to helping agencies prepare for some of this transformative work. And I think there can be a relationship, and sometimes it needs to be siloed and very separate, but I think, there needs to be some kind of thought given to that and maybe some discussion, because I know that there's, some confusion about that. Are they related? Are they not related? And particularly around technology, because even within my own agency, I know my clinical staff, I said that this isn't for the people that we support. This is for the agency and the agency infrastructure. So I think we need to, in our communication, minimally in our communication, need to be addressing that someplace as well.
So you're right. There isn't anything for the interim. That's correct. But what we have told the regions is that if your plan comes in that you want to do this, and that this is then going to get you here, that the regions should be open to doing one-time amendments to help assist with that. It may not be part of the ARPA initiative, but if it gets us to that point that it then moves it off, that's something that we would entertain. But it's going to be, we would need to look at each one to see how that works and how that would help. So for example, if somebody wants to create more customized employment, taking people out of a congregate DSO or on a GSE, and they need to hire a job developer, that should be part of the plan. And then DDS then would figure out, okay, we can do this for X amount of time. And as people start moving out, if that then starts picking up the cost of that job developer, that's what the stuff we would be looking at. So yes, there's nothing in there. But we're trying to work with the providers to help them. How do we get through that transition period for that?
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Shannon, do you have another question?
I do. This is Shannon Jacovino, DDS Buds person. One other thing I want to throw into the mix is that I think it's important to be able to help people to understand how different kinds of funding can be kind of put together or combined to help people to create a plan. And so, for instance, community first choice. I don't think that there is, I don't think across the agency there's a common understanding about how community first choice can be used in combination with DDS funds for a person who's trying to put together their own plan, right? They want to get an apartment and they want to have a roommate. I think there needs to be a better understanding about what other resources are available to people and how they can use whatever resources they get from DDS in combination with other kinds of funding to put together the plan that works for them. And there's actually a bill this session that talks about maximizing Medicaid funds in terms of being able to, get the greatest amount of support dollars to help someone. And so I think we need to be better at understanding at what all those potential resources are and, helping people to put together plans, because I don't think that there is consistency across the regions in either the knowledge or sort of the understanding that that's something that a case manager or that DDS would support someone in doing. But I think we need to be able to do that.
Good point.
Keith Lavalette, DDS. Katie?
Yeah, I would piggyback on what Tracy said, but whoops, am I still there? Part of the interim process or support for the interim is knowing where we are now. And you started with that, Peter, very early on about we need to understand the impact of these new rates. We need to know what's included in the rates. We need to know how those rates are, the new rates, the relationship to the bridge funding that we've been receiving. We need full transparency and detail so that we can calculate, am I ahead of the game or behind the game, even from where I was on July 1st, now with the new rates structure. And that's a big piece that's holding me back. I would very much like to expand our customized employment and competitive employment. I need to raise some salaries to do that. I don't know if I have the resources to do it. The other big elephant in the room that's been here from the beginning is the staffing shortages. And, you know, as I started looking at, can we develop a plan? There isn't any plan that doesn't require some additional staffing. I can't transition staff from what they're doing into doing something new without some bridge. And that's a big stumbling block. And I think in Fairfield County, definitely, but I think it's statewide.
Yeah, this is Peter Mason. I hear you. I get it. It's never a good timing, and this is not a good timing. I mean, we have to move forward with what we can do, and you have to do, you as providers have to do the same. We've done what we can do in terms to assist in terms of that. We just can't go out and grab people off the street and say, you're going to do this. It's the staffing is definitely a big concern. But we're still, we have a deadline that we have to meet. So we need to move forward, and, those agencies that can somehow cobble together staff to move forward, we'll work with. Those that can't, we get it. That doesn't mean, that we're leaving anybody behind. We're just, this is the money we have at the time we have to use it. So, and in terms of the rates, I hear you also. As I only, I knew that they were coming out. I don't know where they're at in terms of the different analysis piece. I have no idea. So, we can go back and ask and see what what they're planning on doing. But I don't have that information. I used to, but I don't anymore. I'm a retiree.
This is Keith Lavaletta, DDS. We're starting to run over. So our last agenda item is our next meeting is January 24th at 1:30. But something that we need to do for a public meeting is schedule or have an annual schedule of meetings for the year. So currently this committee meets, I believe it's every other Tuesday. And I'd like to propose that we continue that schedule going forward at 1:30 every other Tuesday. Is everybody good with that? All right. Anybody have issues with that going forward?
I just have one issue with the 24th. I get to have, joy of all joy, some periodontal surgery on the 23rd. So I have no idea what kind of condition I'll be on the 24th. If I come, I probably won't be talking a whole lot.
That could be a real fun meeting.
I won't be saying a whole lot. That's right.
I'm out on the 24th also for a court proceeding.
I'm also out on the 24th for a court proceeding as well.
So we could cancel certain meetings throughout, but if we have set the annual schedule going forward, we can always change meetings throughout the session. We just have to have on the website an annual schedule of meetings. So if we need to cancel the 24th, we could do that.
All right, so why don't we set it all up, and then we'll take a pulse of everybody, maybe towards the end of next week or something.
Okay, very good. Next, could we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So Stephen moves and wins second. So, all right, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Have a good day.
Have a good week.